Hi and welcome back. Today we're going to be working on raising sheet metal into a hollow form. Now raising is the opposite of sinking or dishing, and you're all familiar with that. If you wanted to make a ladle like this, you'd know that you would just cut the shape out, put it over some kind of a pipe or a hollow form, and then hammer it from the top, and it would stretch and shape itself into a dish like this. Now the biggest problem with sinking is that you're always stretching the metal. So the deeper you go with a form, the thinner and thinner it gets. So for example, if you wanted to make a square-sided dish like this, it would be very difficult to do that by sinking it, because this bottom corner would get so thin that you would tear it out. This dish was made by starting with a flat piece of metal and then compressing all of the sheet metal into this form. So basically this edge is thicker than the bottom, but the bottom is the starting thickness. It's not thinner than the starting thickness. So that's what we're working on today. We're going to be building a simple pan for a Betty lamp, and which is a good project because the sides aren't that high. You still have to raise the metal to shape the piece, but you don't have to do a lot of raising, so you can practice it, you can get good at it, understand what you're doing before you move into a more difficult project. The pattern for the Betty lamp is pretty simple. It's just this basic teardrop shape. You start off by deciding how big you want the inside of the dish to be, and then scribe that as an arc. And then you decide how high you want the walls, and that becomes the outside of the pattern. And then once you decide how long of a spout you want, you just connect all the lines to that point. You're going to need 3 different stakes for today's project. The first one is this thin radius stake. It does need to be made out of tool steel, but it doesn't need to be heat treated. First thing we need to do is shape the spout area that's going to hold the wick. This doesn't really involve any raising. It's really just a matter of folding the 2 sides into position. I'm not going to spend a lot of time shaping the spout right now. I'm mostly concerned about defining the area where the spout intersects with the main body of the pan. The other flat area on this pan is the very back. They always seem to have a flat area here, probably so that they can rest up against the wall or something. Now you can begin to see the basic shape of the lamp, and you can also see where we need to do most of the raising. All of the metal on these 2 bottom corners need to be raised up into a pan shape. To prepare the blank for raising, I need to create a series of folds that are going to go along the areas that need to be compressed. Folding the metal is going to do 2 things for me. First of all, it's going to define the corner where the base meets the sidewall. And most importantly, I'm going to be able to hammer these folds back down onto themselves. And that's how I'm going to be able to compress the metal to shrink these sides down. The key to this process is making sure that I'm bending the metal around this stake, not stretching it. I'm using very thin metal here. This is only 22 gauge, so I can easily shape these folds by just hammering off the edge of the stake. I want to make sure that I don't hammer directly on top of the stake, because that would be thinning the metal and undoing any work that I'm trying to get done. So believe it or not, this mess is really going to turn into a nice uniform pan. Before we can start raising, we have to anneal the blank. This is done by heating it up to a dull orange and then letting it cool. Once the blank cools to a black heat, you can quench it in water and then continue working. You don't have to wait for it to cool slowly on its own. Steels tend to work harden very quickly when you're hammering them cold. Once they begin to work harden, they start to become brittle. Once they become brittle, they stop moving. So any hammering beyond this point is really a waste of time. So it's really important to resist that urge to try to get a little bit more work done before taking the time to anneal the piece. This process is long enough without doing a lot of hammering and stop moving any metal. I'm going to be raising the sides of this blank on this short stubby stake anvil. When I'm hammering out the folds, I need something that can reach inside the blank and support exactly where I'm hammering. Now it's just a matter of slowly working my way up this fold. I'm using a light hammer and a lot of quick, sharp blows. I'm trying to compress the metal back in on itself, not unbend this fold. By the time I do this with all the folds, I'm going to need to anneal the blank before I try to do any more raising. You'll notice that I'm always repositioning the piece to make sure that the hammer blows are always going to be backed up by the anvil. I'm not trying to get a lot of work done at the top edge of the wall at this time. The radius of these folds are quite large, so I'm not going to be able to do a lot of hammering before they start unbending, so I try to do what I can and I leave the rest for another pass. Before I start the second pass on the blank, I'm going to take some time to start defining the base and the wall intersection. Here I'm just following the scribe line on the base of the blank and defining the edge. And I'm going to follow that up by cleaning up all of the folds and making sure that they start right at the base. Now I'm ready to start my second pass, and I go about that exactly the same way that I did the first pass. I start at the base of the folds and work my way up. And I start the third pass exactly the same way that I did the first two. I anneal the blank, and then I bring it over to the anvil and start working at the base of the folds and working my way up to the edge. I use this method and as many passes as I need to get the shape about 80% of the way there. Now I have the shaping mostly done, but I still have a very wavy edge that I haven't been able to get to until now. Before I can get rid of that waviness at the top of the wall, I have to create a solid base up to the midpoint of the wall. So for this pass, I'm hammering systematically around the base of the pan and working my way up the wall very gradually, making sure that I'm hammering a solid ring that doesn't have any wrinkles or any waves in it. As I work my way up the wall, the larger waves are going to naturally transform themselves into a series of smaller wrinkles that I'm going to be able to hammer out. You may need to take a couple of passes to complete this process, so make sure that the blank is fully annealed before you start up the next pass. The last stake you're going to need is a flat stake that's going to fit inside of the pan so you can refine the base and define the edges. Now that the pan has been formed, you just need to do a little bit of hammering to refine the shape and clean up any irregularities. All I need to do now is forge a handle and rivet it to the back side of this pan, same way you would for a ladle. These handles always came up and then over the top to find the center of gravity for this pan. If you have the pivot point too far back, it's going to want to rotate and dump the oil forward. If you have it too far forward, it's going to want to dump the oil back. So you want to find that center point so it hangs level. And that's basically all there is to it. We'll see you next time.